back to another week of the Rev MD podcast. So this week, we're going to talk about how to make your product, your practice, the things that you're managing as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, better. So I actually spent some time this weekend listening to a course information from a guy named Alex Hormozi. If you guys don't know him, go check him out. Business guy, young, has done, multiple different types of business things. And as we, look to constantly be improving our business and our product, just hearing his, approach to how you have to sort of be obsessed with making the product better. And that's always hard, right? If you're a CEO of a small practice, you're seeing patients full time. It's like, how do you carve out the time to be thinking about process and to be thinking about how to make things better? And even with our own business, the team has some time carved out tomorrow to sit and brainstorm on how to improve a process within our own business. So they're going to be sitting down and thinking about audits. And I don't mean coding audits, I mean audits internally. So within each of the practices that we oversee, we actually set up internal audits, which allow us to manage our metrics, understand if the billing process in total is working as intended, right? So are we submitting charges on time? Are payments being posted on time? Is AR being worked? What issues within the AR denials are we seeing? How are we getting those to our clients? And so it's this constant fuel of how do we crank up and improve every single part of both the practices process as well as our own internal process within our business. And the way Alex Hormozi talked about it was truly being obsessed with improving your product. And so the same thing could be said within your practice, right? Because the more parts of the practice that run smoothly, right, whether that's a billing process, a front office process, patient satisfaction, every single part, as you go along your business and as you improve each part, patients or customers are going to want to stay longer, be there for the long term of that practice. And so today we're going to kind of turn this into how do we improve parts of your own billing process so that that piece of your practice, and again, this is whether you insource or whether you're looking for an outsourced partner, how do you improve on that so that every single piece trickles down to improved satisfaction to even your patients, right? Because if your billing process is better, your patient statement accuracy is better, your patient collection is going to be better. And so every part of that does trickle down and impact your own patients, which then in turn make them want to stay. So as you guys know, we are National Revenue Consulting. We are a full service medical billing and coding company. So if you are looking to outsource, head over to our website and check us out. We'd be glad to help, or just get on a call and take a look at your metrics and see how things are going. So while today's talk is really focused on the billing process, you can imagine how kind of taking the same exercise to improve other parts of your process, whether that's something in the front office or how you schedule patients. Of course, pay attention to the specific billing piece, but then think about how you could apply this to other processes within your own business. First and foremost, if we think about the billing process and procedures, we're going to talk about 7 different ways that you can think about improving your own billing process. So the first is going to be, how can you simplify and streamline? So the more complex your billing process is, right? So if you're in a software that you have a billing team attached to it, but then you also have in-house billers that do part of it, plus you've got the front office doing part, how can you simplify the billing process so that it's consolidated and centralized, really, so there's not a whole bunch of different types of communication points that need to be operationalized in order to be successful. In an ideal world, right? If you're in-house, you have the full thing in-house. If you're outsourced, you have it outsourced to one team. The exception to that is I do really think that eligibility and prior auth really deserves to be with the front office staff because, again, from a simplified, centralized perspective, those are the individuals who are interacting with your patients and they're having to provide that information to them. So to me, I think that prior auth eligibility piece really deserves to be in the front office. But then for the remainder of the billing process, having that with a single team, with an individual who oversees that team, who looks at the metrics and who coordinates all of that. Again, if that's an outsourced company, that's great. If it's an in-house, again, it's just trying to simplify and standardize. Of course, hopefully I'm not talking to anybody who still uses paper charts or paper billing by any means, and everything is electronic. And ideally, it's electronic within the same systems. We have a few practices that have an EMR that's interfaced to a third-party billing software or billing software that, we've recommended. And while each of them as a standalone option are great, they don't necessarily simplify the process. And sometimes there are additional audits that you have to do to make sure that the interface is working. Or sometimes the interface then can sometimes, create a duplicate patient in the other system. And so there's just little nuances where, say you're listening to this and you're starting your own practice, or you're new and trying to figure out what's the best option. Try and pick an EMR and a PM software that are integrated, that are within one system, if at all possible. And even better if, they have a clearinghouse that's connected and makes it super duper easy. And when I say connected, I don't necessarily mean within the same company. It just means that they're all interfaced and working together. So for example, Advanced MD, that's one of our favorite EMR and PM softwares. They're connected. They're within the same company. They work with Change Healthcare, which is the clearinghouse. It's connected, streamlined. It is super easy. That's probably my favorite software. And again, I have no stake in the game with regards to picking an EMR or PM software. It's just one of our favorites to use. So the second thing is explaining insurance or managing insurance with your patients. And so it's really important that your staff in the front office are trained and they understand what it means to verify insurance, what it means to get a prior auth, how they're documenting that information, how they're giving those real-time updates to flag a patient when they don't meet eligibility or when an eligibility gets denied. How are they immediately getting the information back to that patient to get the corrected coverage? And so this is extremely important. And I'll share, you guys are welcome to send this, of course, to anybody, but sending this to your front office staff who may be still learning and trying to figure this out. But insurance portals and or your EMR PM software are really the best ways for you to verify coverage, get information when it comes to eligibility. It's not perfect, right? So a PM software could be your first stop. If you have that integrated to the clearinghouse, then you're able to check eligibility probably for the majority of payers. But if that doesn't work, then you can head over to the payer portals. And so that's an important thing that your front office staff needs to have training on. The other piece to this is training for your front office to understand when they should be getting a prior auth and when they shouldn't. And actually, United Healthcare and some other payers are actually decreasing some of the CPTs that need to have prior auths, at least in the lab world. And so that is a constant thing that's changing. And there are ways to check that on the payer portal to check if they need to do a prior auth. And you need to make sure you're looking at plan to plan, right? So just because you're looking at United Healthcare, if a patient has a different plan, they may have a different need for certain prior auths. So you want to make sure that you're being specific when it comes to knowing where to do eligibility, what it means, real-time updates to the patients, and that you're doing the same thing for your prior auths. Now, the third thing is educational resources for your patients. And this is really about creating informative brochures or online resources or videos even for your patients so that they understand insurance terminology. They understand maybe even common CPTs that you could be billing and how to read an EOB. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you guys have had this experience as well, that a patient calls and they're like, oh my gosh, my explanation of benefits says that, you charged $400. I can't believe that's what you charge for a visit. When in reality, we all know, A, you're not getting paid $400, and B, we're having to do a percent of charges of the Medicare fee schedule, for example. And so the EOB just is that initial charge, but of course you're not going to be getting paid that, and the patient's not having to also pay that. And so it's important for patients to kind of have a very high level understanding of these explanations of benefits. And again, insurance terminology such as copays and coinsurance and deductibles and Pocket Max. And so we actually did create a patient pamphlet. We actually just added the PDF directly to our website. So you can head over there. And if you just go to our website at nationalrevenueconsulting.com, go to the patient AR tool, and you can put in your email and download. And I promise we won't spam you. It's just a way for us to give updates every week on the podcasts we release. So head over there, you can download that PDF, and then you can print it. It is double-sided, it's a trifold, and hand that out to patients. So these educational resources are key. They say that 40%, you have a 40% higher likelihood of getting paid by your patients more timely when they understand the definitions of copay, deductible, coinsurance, et cetera. So some key things that both your front office should need to know and your patients should need to know is that what they are paying is really information based on what their contract is with their payer, right? It's not the doctor's office saying that you owe the $20 copay. It's the insurance company saying that they owe the $20 copay. And deductible, coinsurance, all of that is dictated by the insurance company. So for them to understand that, understand what a copay is, how that differs from a deductible, et cetera, is going to make them more aware of, oh, I get why I'm paying this $20 today. I get why I'm getting this or bill from the doctor's office that says that my deductible wasn't met and I need to pay that extra $150. So all of those things are really important for, again, educational resources for your front office, for anybody who's answering patient questions, or ideally directly to your patients. I think patients nowadays want that information. They want to understand how they can participate in the care of their treatment, and that also includes their financial responsibility when it comes to paying their medical bills. Next is communication. We all know how important it is to have communication channels, and that can be between your front office, between the doctors, between your billing company, and this is really important to have hardwired. I'm really trying to get a lot of our practices away from using email as the main source of communication. Obviously, we've got some EMR and PM softwares that allow us to direct message within the system. And to me, I feel like if you can do that, attach it to a patient's record so that any question we have regarding a code or any sort of medical chart question, anything, if we can do it within the EMR PM software, we message directly the physician or the front office and say, hey, we've got a question about Sally Smith's record, and here's the question I have. One, it attaches for future documentation, so you have that note in the EMR. Two, we're not having to find an email chain to respond back. Three, HIPAA, right? We all know HIPAA. So all of those mean that if we can push as much communication amongst your billing teams, your front office within the EMR and PM software, that's great. We all know that patients love communication with a MyChart or a messaging system within the EMR. And I've done a podcast several weeks ago, maybe several months ago at this point, on, I think it's called Charge Like a Lawyer. So go check it out because it talks about just ways you think about patient messages within an EMR and, can you charge for those? What answers or what questions should you answer? So go check that out if you haven't. But again, communication channels is just really, really important. I also am a big fan of, if there are questions about your patient's statement, then who answers those? How do those get answered? And do you have payment plans or flexible payment options when there are struggles with a patient paying a specific bill? And so these are all just kind of in that realm of communication and solving problems within your practice. Next is feedback mechanisms. And feedback mechanisms can be in two areas, right? Feedback from your staff. So making sure that, is the office having weekly meetings? Are we picking apart processes that maybe aren't super smooth and adding KPIs to those? Are we enabling our staff to communicate with each other and help have responsibility and ownership for parts of the process that maybe they live and work in day to day? And I think this is just really important from a work satisfaction perspective, right? To feel part of the solution, to feel like you own a process and can come to leadership with a solution, I think just has everybody super engaged. And then the next feedback is feedback from your patients. How are things working? When they come in to visit the office, What are things that are going really well? What are things that maybe didn't go that well that day? And then are you taking that feedback and then doing something with it? So having some sort of feedback mechanism is really important. We also really like feedback mechanisms between our billing teams and the office. And we create these issue trackers that allows us to alert the practice of specific issues related to a patient or to a process that puts us on the radar to have when we meet with the clients, a lot of times when we're kind of in transition, that's oftentimes weekly, so that we're going through that process and going, this is working, this is not working, and how can we work together and improve this? And depending on how complex your billing process is, this may take months. If you have a lot of old AR that needs to get resolved, this may take months. So all of those things are just really important to have a process around. It's okay to not expect perfection. Actually, we all know that that's almost impossible, but it is good to have a feedback mechanism to understand how we can work on things and constantly be trying to improve our practice, improve our product again, which is really the name of this podcast, is just how can we improve things and constantly be striving for that next better goal. And then the last thing is just obviously staying compliant and auditing your practices. So you really want to make sure that you are assessing the compliance with your healthcare regulations and billing process to avoid any sort of dispute or legal complications. It's really advised that folks are getting a coding audit. We offer this service, of course, but even if you choose not to use us, please make sure that somebody external to your billing office is doing coding audits for your team. So when we do coding audits, we make sure that it's a different set of coders than, say, are working on that account, because we really want to make sure that you have that external review of your medical charts, you're understanding what codes were dropped, were there any mistakes, and getting that feedback to the physicians. Because at the end of the day, it's the physician who saw the patient who is ultimately responsible for the codes that are dropped on those patients. And so it's really, really important to constantly be having some sort of checkup. One, because regulations and CPT code terminations or terminology changes. And two, because you don't want to wake up 3 years down the line, have a retrospective audit, and have major recoupment or paybacks. So compliance and transparency is just one way to constantly be improving your billing process, and something I highly recommend being on autopilot within your practice. So again, by implementing these types of strategies, your practice can simplify the billing process, can get the feedback that they need from their patients, can look at KPIs and develop those within your office with your staff. And really, you're empowering your staff to understand, how do I take something that is clunky and improve on that? And maybe what that problem is this quarter is different than next quarter. Of course, always having transparency around who you're credentialed with, what pricing you're charging any self-pay patient, staying compliant with the No Surprises Act. All of these things are just super duper important. And so if you're listening to this going, gosh, I have some work to do, I would say pick one, right? We don't need to do all of this in the same day. I think if I were looking at this going, I need to work on my own practice, I think the first thing to do is just a current state assessment of what the billing process looks like. What opportunities and things are going really well, and what things should we take a look at closer and see if we can put some, KPIs around, or some performance improvement projects around. So hopefully this just kind of gets your brain thinking about ways you can improve your own practice. I know that when I, again, listened to Alex Hormozi over the last few days, that is the thing I kept thinking about, is how do I improve our own process? How do I improve the process within our own practices? And really just strive so that we're constantly in that churn of improving things and helping our ultimate goal of helping physicians. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast. Have a great, great rest of your weekend.